Hello and Privyet. Welcome back, tubers and connoisseurs of fine imperial and Soviet Russian militarism. Today we have something that's going to really blow your mind. Right, Igor?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Today I have something pretty unique, at least from my experience, and something that I don't get very often at all, maybe once every few years at best. It's a pretty scarce item in its own right. And also the piece that I have today is especially unusual, and I'll explain why. And what I'm talking about is actually a Chinese decoration that was awarded to Soviet airmen during the North Korean War, during the war in Korea. And obviously under false pretenses, the whole name of it means something else that it was probably in all likelihood, in reality, awarded for. So there's a bit of a mystery here. And even if it's in its name, there is a significant discrepancy. Different sources refer to it differently. The most accepted name, and that's general consensus more or less, if there is such a thing, is to call it honorary badge for the defense of New Shanghai.
Wow, I love it.
There are other versions. Some call it Order of Shanghai Air Defense. I've even heard some fanciful names like Star of Shanghai.
Shanghai. Korean War.
Korean War, and not just Korean War, but the very beginning of it. And we are talking about Soviet aviators that arrived in China, supposedly for a totally different purpose.
Rascals.
Very early, before the main influx of Soviet forces of every kind came to China to surreptitiously fight on the side of North Korea. And in many ways changed the situation in favor of North Korea because of this massive amount of material and also because of experience that many Soviet cadres had that, of course, Chinese didn't, and not to speak of North Koreans, of course, didn't. So it's a very interesting part of history, in my opinion, and also a very nicely made decoration in its own right. We are not talking some junk. We are not talking something modern.
No, it's
when
not crap
people
over.
hear Chinese metal, they may think of something made of aluminum very cheaply in the past 20 or 30 years. And that would be the case with something very recent. The older Chinese pieces, those that they awarded in many cases for the Korean War or for the Chinese Civil War, as a matter of fact, they're made to very high quality standard. They are often in brass, and this particular badge that we have today is actually in silver, with nice enamel work, with very beautifully executed details. And so it really has a lot to show for it. And beside that, this particular piece, the Shanghai Air Defense Order, is very scarce. And the reason it's scarce is because unlike some other awards that China issued to the Soviets for the Korean War especially, this one was apparently given to a very small group of individuals. And the theory is that these are the people that arrived first. And the reason it's called Defense of New Shanghai is that, yes, indeed, there was a great tension, as we know, between the communist Chinese, the Red China, as we know it today, and the so-called nationalist government of Taiwan that held off China, Red China, at bay, despite more than one attempt to take them over. Some people may not know, but there was actually a fully fledged, almost invasion, you could call it, in the 1950s, in the mid-50s. And then another one, so-called Taiwan incident, or Taiwan Strait incident.
That's right.
And there was another, the second incident, when there was a serious attempt by China, by Red China, that is mainland China, to invade the newly established Republic of China, Taiwan. And it was repelled in many ways due to very strong air arm that Taiwanese had. And because of that air domination, they were able to stop the invasion force. And that was very much on the mind of the Communist government of China. and they somehow needed to make sure that this air domination ends. In addition to that, they made claims, at least, and they were probably partially true, that because the conflict was still ongoing, the Taiwanese were able to inflict some damage on the Chinese mainland industrial facilities that were within reach. And one area in particular that Red Chinese were very concerned about was the so-called New Shanghai. This may not sound like anything today. If you Google New Shanghai, you'll probably get a bunch of restaurants,
takeouts,
and menus.
That's right. Yeah.
But back then, in the 50s, in the early 50s, late 40s, it was known as an industrial area around Shanghai proper that was extremely important because all the new enterprises, all the big factories were concentrated there. And that area was actually within reach of Taiwanese Air Force. So under this claim, Chinese invited Soviet airmen to provide protection for the mainland, supposedly, against the Taiwanese. We know what was going on in reality. In reality, Chinese at that point were already fully prepared for the Korean War. The North Koreans were itching, at least the leadership, of course, not the people, but leadership of North Korea was itching for the war. There were some recently declassified, and when I say recently, maybe 25, 30 years ago, declassified documents that came from the Soviet archives, former Soviet, then Russian archives, at the time of relative thaw in relationship with the West, Yeltsin era we are talking about. And I remember being at a conference of Slavic studies in Georgetown University, not as a guest or speaker or anything like that, for a completely different purpose, but I actually had access to newly published books or magazines. And one of them specifically had to do with correspondence between Kim Il-sung, the first so-called great ruler, great leader of North Korea, and Stalin personally. And you could tell that Stalin was deathly afraid of armed conflict with the United States. And we know why. At that time, Soviets did not have enough nukes to begin with. Their first nuclear test, as you probably know, happened in 1949. They were just catching up to the United States, in large part because of the espionage, massive espionage, and all the secrets that they were able to steal by having infiltrators in the Manhattan Project and other areas, like infamous case of
the
married couple, Rosenbergs, that got executed eventually for doing just that, spying for the Soviets for years, actually. And despite all that effort, massive effort that was put into development of nuclear bomb, Soviets only were able to conduct the first test in 1949. They by the early 50s, they already had workable weapons that they could possibly theoretically deliver. They had no means of delivery. They were still lagging behind in terms of bomber development. And again, it's when you look at history, you will know that Soviets, supposedly the allies of the United States and Britain during the war, still had a non-aggression pact with Japan up until basically the Hiroshima bomb and their direct involvement when they ripped it up. But up until that point, they were neutral power as far as Japan went. So any American airplanes that had to crash land, in some cases happened, in the Soviet Far East after overflowing Japan on their bombing runs, were interned. And Soviets had this, at least on paper, this right to do that, an obligation, because they were not a combatant in this war with Japan. And 3 of the B-29s, B-29 flying fortresses, actually landed on the Soviet territory and were kept by the Soviets. There were actually one that crash landed additionally. So in total, there were as many as 5 that they got their hands of. 3 were actually in working condition, in flying condition. They carefully reverse engineered those planes and created their own. Tupolev Design Bureau created a bomber by the order of the government that copied precisely the American B-29. Well, there were problems with it because, of course, the Soviets did not have the exact machinery that Americans used. They did not have the same standards as far as even sizes and weights, because Americans were using inches and the Soviets were using the centimeters, for example. So all their machinery was tuned to this standard as opposed to pounds and
sure, yeah,
and therefore the material of needed gauge, for example, didn't exist. For example, aluminum sheets were not the same thickness as what was required to build B-29. So Russian planes were Soviet-made planes, even though they copied it. And there was this famous incident at Tushino Air Parade. Tushino is a place near Moscow where they conduct aviation flights to great, usually acclaim, and there are always many journalists from around the world, the press. There was this famous case when 3 of the supposedly Soviet planes flew over Tushino airfield, and everybody expected that those were the planes that they kept after Second World War, never returning them to the United States. But then the 4th plane appeared. Now everybody knew that they only had 3 in flying condition. So the 4th was obviously the Tupolev plane.
Right.
That was a copy. But despite all that, they still did not have reliable ways of delivery because, first of all, they were lagging in the number of planes. But also the planes were not up to standard. Despite every effort, enormous amount of manpower, those planes could not reliably reach the United States. They, in theory, could fly one way. It would be a suicidal kamikaze kind of trip for the crew. But even with that in mind, chances of them actually delivering a nuclear bomb anywhere in the United States were pretty slim against air defenses and so forth and so on. And the Americans were already fully, when they realized what was going on, they became very prepared. There were special exercises held. So long and short of it, Soviets did not have means of getting into and winning a hot war, a nuclear war with the United States in the 50s. And Stalin did not want the Korean conflict to begin with. You could see in the correspondence that Kim Il-sung was very much pushing for it and making false claims like, oh, South Koreans attacked us, they're really audacious, they're in our face, they're doing all those bestial things to our people. Of course, it wasn't true, but the truth of the matter is that he really itched for war. Finally, Stalin acquiesced. Finally, he allowed the North Koreans and Chinese as their backers to get into it, but on one condition, that Soviets, even though they would be helping, would never show their hand, would never really admit that they are fully involved. So Chinese were sort of given green light to do that on their own, at their own risk, but Stalin wanted to stay away from it. He knew that they were in no shape whatsoever in the 50s, at least the early part of the 50s, to get into an armed conflict. And you could say that nukes are really what kept the world whole at that point.
Right, peace through strength, yeah.
Exactly. If not for the nuclear bombs and means of delivery that United States and Britain had, there would probably be another war in Europe.
Right.
There would be absolutely no stopping it otherwise. You could also see it from some Soviet documents. Again, I digress a little bit, but when you look at what was going on with Soviet way of thinking, they were still expecting to get into very serious conflict and maybe fully fledged war in the mid-40s. I'm pretty sure, because you could see that many officers at the end of the war remained in the military. Right. And in 1946, 47, many of them were sent for further education to military academies. And then all of a sudden, in 1948, a lot of those officers got retired. Why? Because Stalin realized that the gap is just too wide. Even if they get a nuke, which he expected they would, there would be not enough of them and no delivery methods.
Well, the evidence was there about Stalin's intentions.
Right. So, with that in mind, it's understandable why Soviet direct involvement in Korea was such a great secret. And Soviets only admitted to it finally during the Glasnost era and the Gorbachev, but never earlier. Soviets were supposedly never there. And it's also understandable now why the very first group of Soviet airmen that arrived to China during the conflict already were there for supposedly a completely different reason. Later, this effort a much larger effort was required, and it was greatly expanded, but always under very significant shroud of secrecy. Soviet pilots, for example, were required to wear civilian clothes when they were outside of the immediate base of airfield. They were pretending to be business travelers in most cases when they even got to their designated point, and so forth and so on. They were strictly banned from speaking Russian on the air. And it was kind of humorous sometimes that they would curse in Russian. And that's how they got caught. That's how Americans and the UN forces got wind of Russians actually being present there. But their manual was to never do that, never utter a single Russian word. They were prohibited from flying in certain areas. They were never to cross far into the South Korean held territory or come too close to the shore at fear that they would be shut down and recognized as Soviets. So that was very much on Stalin's mind all throughout the conflict. But in the meantime, this first group arrived. I'm pretty sure they took part in the war beyond New Shanghai area. And of course, this was just a cover. Later, as I said, the effort greatly expanded. And thousands of Soviets actually went through China and took part in the war. And not just aviation specialists, not just pilots, but also anti-aircraft technicians, many air defense units, anti-aircraft artillery units, and so forth and so on. If you look at just the beginning, in the first wave, there were 3 air divisions that arrived in China in as early as October of
divisions
of 1950.
Substantial involvement.
That's a very substantial force. Then, within a pretty short time, I think by December, and I can go through the list of these divisions, like first air units to arrive were 328th Fighter Air Division. And I'm just mentioning fighters, but there were also ground attack airplanes. There were a lot of trainers to train North Koreans. There was 17th Fighter Air Division, 144th Fighter Air Division of PVO, of anti-aircraft branch of the Soviets. Then there were additional 3 regiments just for the air defense of Beijing alone, supposedly. So there were a number of airplanes that comprised an entirely new air division, 20th Air Division, stationed just there. And on top of that, in December of 1950, 3 more air divisions are being sent into China. And we can go on and on. 309th, 65th, 324th, 106th Fighter Air Division, 52nd Anti-Aircraft Artillery Division, 29th Guards Air Regiment with MiG-15s, and on and on and on. So again, in the first days of their involvement, their purpose was supposedly to train North Koreans that were gravely lacking in training and experience, and that's why many of them fell victim in the early days of the war. There was, you could say, a total American air domination, but that changed pretty quickly when Russians started sending their top-of-the-line MiG-15s. There were other planes involved too, but what North Koreans had in the beginning of the war were mostly obsolete World War II Soviet models such as piston engine aircraft,
Yes.
such as Lavachkin 9, for example, or Il-10, which is the descendant of the famous Il-2 Sturmovik, but it was not that different from the World War II model. Neither of them were. None of them were. So they fell easy prey, relatively speaking, to American planes, but that started to change pretty quickly when the Soviets arrived on the scene and pretty soon started taking direct part in fighting. So if you look at history of Soviet involvement, there are various claims, depending on what side you are on and who do you listen to. But without a doubt, a number of Soviet airmen, pilots, became air aces in Korea by shooting down 5 or more United Nations aircraft. So it was a serious struggle. And you could say that MiG-15 was a very unpleasant surprise for the UN forces, for Americans in particular, because even the best American fighter jet at the time, the Sabre, F-86, was not quite a match in terms of maneuverability and some other ways to MiG-15.
Yep.
So that was a pretty unfortunate. And one thing that happened almost immediately with the beginning of Soviet involvement is that B-29s that dominated the skies and bombed the North Korean positions at will up until that point, they were relegated to flying just night missions. They could not operate openly during daytime anymore because of this constant danger, constant presence of MiG-15s. So it changed the situation quite dramatically, and I'm sure the outcome of the Korean War would have been very different if not for the very early and very decisive Soviet involvement.
Right, it could have just ended a lot earlier.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah. Despite even assuming the Chinese would have done what they've done anyway, with their massive millions strong army pouring over the border, so-called volunteers, we know what they were in reality. But even with that, it wouldn't be enough to stand against the UN forces, if not for the fact that they also, in many ways, contested the skies. So there are many books written about it, and I can recommend a couple of them. As a matter of fact, since we're on the subject, this would be a great book. It's called Red Devils over the Yalu, and this is a chronicle of Soviet air operations in the Korean War from 1950 to 1953. It was published in Moscow in 2012, I believe, or somewhere around that, 2014. And it has been, it was translated, it was published in 2013 and then translated into English and published here in 2014. So it's a book to get if you are interested in this part of history of Soviet involvement. And another book that I like very much and constantly use is called Stalin's Eagles. It was published here in the States by Schiffer Publishing. And this is one of the better Schiffer books. They're not always the same quality. It's by Sigel. And it's mostly about World War II aces. But there is a whole chapter in this book that I wanted to show called Soviet Fighter Aces in Korea. And there are great photographs and also tables of more successful, of names of more successful aces with the number of kills that were attributed to them, specific units where they served, and just a wealth of information. So a great book to get called Stalin's Eagles if you like history of aviation, World War II and Korean War era. Definitely get this book. But returning to the badge, I want to say a few words about how it looks, what makes it, this particular piece that I have today, so unique. And of course, some characteristics of the badge. I think it would be of interest to collectors to protect themselves from buying a fake sometime down the road.
Right.
And we will also discuss prices.
Right. And you said so few have passed through your hands.
Very, very few. I would say in the past 15 years, maybe 5 or so.
Wow, way less than Hero Stars.
Yeah, far fewer than here.
Only 5.
Yeah. And I think the reason is that so few were given to only to the very first group of Soviet pilots that arrived in Korea, in China rather, to fight in Korea, as we now know.
Right.
And it's certainly not everybody, not every Soviet who got this badge. Badges were exclusively given to the Soviets. When they show up, they typically show up, or at least originate, from the former Soviet Union. And we are talking Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and other republics. But even there, it's a rarity. And I've seen great uptick in interest to this item in particular. And again, it's a huge difference in terms of availability between the standard medal that many collectors are probably familiar with of Sino-Soviet friendship, for example.
Yes.
That was given to practically every Soviet advisor in Korea, be it military or civilian, who, however, in whatever capacity he was participating, up until very late 1950s, when the relationship with China broke up, they were issued to almost every Soviet in China. So that medal, which is very interesting in its own right, and there are variations, and we can make a separate episode on just that medal and versions of it, and documents. Yeah. So those are quite interesting too. Yeah. But that one is very common by comparison, even though it's not the most common of medals. Many Soviets didn't keep their Chinese awards, for example, for the reason that obviously China became a big enemy actually in the 60s, and especially later. There was actually an armed conflict between the Soviet Union and China. Right. Have you heard of it? The so-called Dabansky incident?
Right, the
when there was
events, yes.
When there was actually heavy fighting.
Yeah,
with a lot of casualties on both sides. A border conflict between China and between formerly great sponsor of China, the Soviet Union, and Chinese government. Yeah. So in any case, a very unique, very interesting piece, very nicely made, and I want to discuss those fine points.
Yeah, let's see, you got a piece here. Let's take a closer look at this.
Let's take a closer look. Okay, and now let's look at the badge itself, the fine details. That's what all those fine points that make it interesting numismatically. It's made of silver, which is quite unusual for even early Chinese awards. And you can see the design is in many ways resembling Soviet World War II designs, even though with Chinese flair. This is very interesting. The hands, the handshake with the wings, and of course wings signify the air arm. These are aviators exclusively who could receive this badge. The text here in Mandarin is for exactly that, for the defense of New Shanghai, or the defense of New Shanghai. And the panorama of the city is this industrial zone that was so important to the Red Chinese government. The red star is enameled. This is hard-baked enamel, again, nice quality. And you can see that, I'm not sure if our camera will show it, but there is a hint of gilt, whatever remains. And there are a couple of theories about this. I tend to think that all of these badges were initially gilded, and many just lost the gold plating because of the wear. It was probably pretty fragile. Some still have it, and that's all the difference. There is also an opinion that badge came in 2 classes, first and second, and that only the first class had the gilding on it. So that would make this particular piece the first class. I'm a little skeptical about that, simply because in no document anybody has ever seen there's a mentioning of first or second class. So there were documents issued to the Soviets along with the badge, or with the medal, and they always say medal or badge for the defense of New Shanghai in Russian, which is a translation of the Chinese text. The document is in both Chinese and Russian, and there was never a mentioning of first or second class. So my assumption is that they're all the same class, but I may be wrong on that. It's pretty massive, pretty nicely made, all around. Nice edge. Pin always looks like what you see here, and here on the back is a very unique detail that I've never seen before. Neither on the badges that passed through my hands or any photos that I've seen up to this date, none of them ever had a serial number. This piece, and I'll admit to you, I acquired it from somebody who had no idea what it was. There was absolutely no premium on the fact that there is a serial number. I'm not even sure the person who sold it even saw it, or definitely he didn't put any significance on the number at all. So I don't think this is anybody's fantasy. I don't think this was added to enhance the value of the badge. I think it's actually the opposite. If you look at the number very carefully, the style resembles very much the Soviet handwriting of the period. The AN stands for numeral sign, and 17 is very much engraved in Russian style, especially in the style that you would expect from 1950s. So I think this may be one of the first of these badges ever issued. Entirely possible. Who knows? It may also correspond with something entirely different. Maybe the number of the unit. Maybe something else. But the point is, this is the only one I've ever seen that has a
We don't just jump to conclusions just because it's a low number.
No, of course. And again, we are not putting any premium on this fact, but I think it's just a very interesting detail. And who knows, maybe there are others. And if any of the collectors who are watching our channel and this episode have heard or seen another badge like this with a serial number, please put it in the comments below. I would be very curious to hear about it. Yes. But it's definitely the first in my experience. The pin, made in a very peculiar way. You see the attachments of the pin, this kind of wire is very specific to this badge. It's never different than that. The pin itself is in brass. Again, this is standard for this badge. There is a version I heard of. I don't recall seeing it, but at least I've heard of it, and it has supposedly the screw attachment. What I suspect happened here is probably that all the badges initially had a pin attachment, and then maybe, possibly, some of the Soviet recipients converted them to screwback just for the convenience of wearing the badge on the uniform. And as you know, Soviet military tradition was to have screwbacks on important decorations. And it was in some ways practical because it would affix it very reliably to the tunic. So you didn't have to struggle with it, and it wouldn't be askew while you were wearing it. Pin wouldn't provide that opportunity. So possibly some of them, and that's just my theory, I have no ways of proving it, some of them probably changed the attachment to custom-made screwback. But that's as far as variations go. Again, there is gilded versus non-gilded possibility between assumed first and second class, but that may be just an optical illusion, sort of. And also there is a possibility that there were badges with screw attachment, but in all likelihood not. They were just customized issues. That's all as far as the construction and details of the badge. Take a close look. I think details this nice make it very hard to fake it. And I'm sure we are going to see fakes down the road. I haven't seen any convincing ones yet, but I'm sure they will be appearing considering the prices, and we'll get to that. This is pretty scarce. This is a pretty scarce item, pretty sought after. So you have to be careful when buying one, and of course pay attention to all the fine points of the design.
Because you never know.
You never know. Now, as far as fakes, just further means of protection, I know it's never a guarantee of anything, but it's nice to have exact weight and exact measure and compare it with known, definitely original pieces that were observed in the past. And for that purpose, I looked at the ones that we had in recent years. Nice. And I say recent, maybe 15 years or so. And the measurements were as such: height and weight, and I'm quoting the height first, 50.7 millimeters in height by 48.6, 50.6 by 48.2, 50.9 by 49.0, 50.8 by 48.5. So you can see that it's pretty consistent. We are talking deviation of maybe just a couple of fractions of decimals of millimeter. It's never, I doubt that there will be any badges observed that have a width of much more than 49. And the lowest we've seen was 48.2. So it's somewhere in this range that the originals should be. Now, our own measurements of weight, and we also had some measurements from other fairly reliable, I think, trustworthy source, and they're such: 42.6 grams, 42.4, 48.3, 38.7, 36.4, 40.3, 40.8, 50.7. Again, much more of a variance than size in terms of decimals. But that's standard. That's just like Soviet decorations are from the period. We've already discussed that. But what you want to see is the range of not much less than 36 and not much more than 50. 50, maybe 51. 50.7 is the heaviest one that I've ever heard of. And this, by the way, is one not measured by me. As far as diameter of the badge itself, it's supposed to be 50.8. This is, of course, approximate, but the star is supposed to fit into a circle with 50.8 millimeters diameter.
Yes.
Okay, so that's as far as the physical characteristics of the badge. And now the last thing I want to cover is the prices.
Okay.
And I wish we had more examples, at least in the past 15, 20 years. But as I mentioned before, the badge is very scarce.
Yeah,
I've
very
only
scarce.
been lucky a few times to have it. And the ones that I have records of, at least, was sold for $675 is what we are asking for the current piece. Then in 21, we had one sold for $475.
Wow.
In 2019, $450, and the same price in 2016. So the prices haven't really changed very much in the last 15 years, except for in the past year or two. What I've seen happening is there were great interest in these badges, and I saw prices really spike in Russian auctions or in auctions in the former Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And they were selling for even considerably more than what we are asking here. We are talking $700-800 range in the past year, at least.
But still, it's a bargain beyond belief.
I think so, because again,
its
we don't
historical
know and
significance.
probably will never know the exact number of issues,
Yeah.
but they're far more scarce than
Wow.
Sino-Soviet Friendship Medal. And of course, it's a fact that only aviators and most likely pilots, possibly navigators, who could be awarded with this badge. And my strong belief is that it was just the initial group of so-called advisors arriving to China
Yes.
to, of course, fight in the Korean War, but nobody would admit that.
Yeah, they're made of
It's a
silver.
very interesting piece. I know, by judging by the documents, they were issued at some point, they could be issued at some point from late 1950s to maybe late 1952. So almost for the entire duration of the Korean War, but not quite. And again, knowing how many of Soviets were there, we can be pretty comfortably certain that it's just a selected few
Yes.
who got the badge, not
Yes.
everybody.
Yeah, sure enough, they're hard to find.
Absolutely, yeah. At least in my experience, and I'm sure many other dealers and collectors confirm that.
Yeah.
This is a hard cookie.
Yes.
So anytime that you find one of these somewhere in the display case,
Grab it.
grab it. Especially if the dealer doesn't know
Wow.
what it
yeah.
is, because it's such
It's
a
under $1,000. Just buy it.
such a scarce kind of animal.
Wow, that's incredible. This is kind of like the Bitcoin of Soviet military right there.
I don't know about that,
Well, the potential. Eh?
but it probably has a potential, yes, because there are so many angles that converge here that is interesting for aviation collectors.
Of course.
It is interesting for anybody who is interested in early Cold War
Yes.
and Korean War in particular. Stalinist era. We know it ended in the 50s, and it was definitely during the Stalin's period and Mao Zedong era.
Just incredible.
That this piece was issued, and also the quality, I think, is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and just like you said, the imagery of the handshake there, with the wings. If you're not paying attention, you're just looking at it like it's some kind of just piece of a trinket, some industrial trinket, because it has that building in the background.
Right.
You got to pay close attention and know what you're looking at.
There is significance to it.
That's right. There's gold in them dark hills right here. Very nice.
Hold the boat. This doesn't look like Chinese wine.
No, but I just thought it would be a totally inappropriate way to finish our discussion of a Chinese medal.
Okay, gotcha.
The only parallel that I can make between this wine and this badge that we just discussed is this wine is a bit of a mystery to me too.
Oh, like that. That's a good segue, right? A mystery follows a mystery.
Yeah. What do you think?
Yes. What is the mystery?
Well, I don't really know this appellation very well, and when you look at it, it says Medoc, right? But it's Mouly and Medoc, and Mouly and Medoc is kind of out of the way. The ones that I know better are all along the river, and these are the famous appellations such as Saint-Estèphe or Pauillac or Margaux and so forth. And they're all part of the larger Medoc, but they're the most prominent and famous ones. And Mouly is a little bit out of the way. It's farther south.
Yes.
So it's not right on the bank of the river, when you have the bank of the river. And it's not the cheapest one of them. It still kind of commands a premium. So I always avoided buying it simply because I didn't know what it was and why I had to pay extra money for something So it's kind of evil circles.
Okay. Yes.
When you don't get it because it's a little too expensive, and then you never know what it is, and therefore because you don't know what it is, you don't buy it because it's a little too expensive.
Gotcha.
See the logic?
Yeah, it's.
But anyway, let's put this mystery to test.
Okay. Yes.
And let's finish it here.
That's right. Let's solve this mystery.
I know it's supposed to be. It's very, very well respected appellation of Medoc, or sub-appellation.
Okay.
And Mouly, by the way, see Mouly. That stands for what do you call it? Windmill.
Oh, windmill.
It's a windmill.
Okay. That's what it translates to.
Have you heard of Moulin Rouge, the famous?
Oh, Moulin Rouge. That's
Moulin
where you
Rouge.
see the windmill.
Yeah, they actually have that. Well, I think it burned down just recently. But when I was in Paris last time, I saw it. So it's still there, and it's a red windmill.
Moulin.
So this stands for the same thing. I think it's a little bit changed.
Okay. So root
basically,
word.
Yeah. It's
windmill.
basically a windmill in Medoc.
Nice. Very nice.
And let's see if it's all just hot air or
yes.
Actually
hot air blowing through the windmill.
You'll be the first.
Well, I'll have to take your
be a
lead.
judge.
Yes. And once again, these corks sometimes they're fickle, but most of the time they're good.
This one so far feels fine.
Right. You gotta have technique. All right. Okay. Yeah, this cork is coming out fine, intact.
So far.
Yeah, we like that pop. Let's see.
Looks good. It smells good too.
Very, very fine aroma. Very fine aroma.
All right.
Now, when would a wine just smell bad right offhand? How would you describe it?
Well, first of all, it may smell cork. If you smell cork, that's bad.
Okay. The smell of cork is bad.
Smell of cork is bad because it affects, permeates the entire wine. It's not just the top of it that will smell like cork.
Gotcha.
All of the wine will smell like cork. Because the cork went bad. Other things are possible. Sometimes you feel this musty, smell.
A musty smell.
Yeah,
gotcha.
That's bad.
Gotcha.
I mean, if manufacturer just won't smell right. It won't smell pleasant when it's bad.
I see.
It happens, unfortunately.
Oh, thank you.
And let's see. Let's roll it a little.
Oh, yes.
So far so good. I like the nose.
Very aromatic. Very aromatic.
Yeah, fruity, but not too much.
Okay.
And again, there's like this mineral sub note. No, am I imagining it?
When you say
Whatever,
mineral,
like mineral, like dust, like quartz, or whatever was in the soil.
rocky,
Yeah,
gritty,
like crushed minerals.
okay, dusty. That's the best word
yeah,
because I mean we don't smell rock.
We're
more familiar with dust.
It's just tiny note. It's not like you're eating dirt.
right, right. And it doesn't mean like you're ready to sneeze.
Oh, look at this! It's so full.
Mystery solved.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's
Damn, it's awesome.
That's right.
It's
That's
so
why
different
the
and so good.
price has been justified.
I think so.
Right. Wow. Wow. I'm glad I'm over 21.
I love this wine.
Yeah. This is very good.
This is what what a nice combination should be. Tannins
Right.
and some fruitiness, and it's still smooth.
Okay.
It has some acidity in the right amounts.
Okay.
It's just perfect balance to me.
Right. Okay. For all you viewers out there, obviously this doesn't make any sense. There's no smellometer in your computer screen.
No, I feel for you.
But you got to just go out there,
You can find the bottle. You know.
buy a bottle.
Yeah,
Right.
if it's not in your local liquor store,
Right.
get it online.
That's
there are a
right.
few places that I order from, and I can
There we go.
recommend them. Invina is specifically a nice one. Invina.
Invina. Okay.
That just search for it.
Okay.
Another one is Saratoga wine shop. It's just Google Saratoga wine.
Saratoga wine.
Saratoga wine. They're in
.com, I
upstate
guess.
New York.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact.
Yeah.
But
New York
in
wine
New York
region.
State. Yeah.
Yeah.
They sell wines from all over the world,
Okay.
and they have fantastic selection, pretty fair prices.
Right.
And
But New York
sometimes
wines are
New York price, New York wines.
New York wines.
The white ones in particular, are very good.
Yeah. Highly recommended, right?
Yeah, from Finger Lakes.
Oh. I mean, New York just has a lot to offer. You know, there's a lot of
there's a lot of it outside of New York City.
so much to offer.
lot
Just
to it,
you know, the negative stuff gets all the attention.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Right. That's it. And folks, make sure you check out JendaNYC. That's my personal channel. It's pretty much try to highlight all the positives of New York City.
Yeah, Jenda, it was absolutely fascinating.
Oh yeah.
The episodes that I've seen so far.
Yeah. And you must visit Luigi's. Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I really
Pizzeria.
must. I really must.
Yep. Old school. It's a cash business. Every slice is $2.50. And anytime you drop in, the owner Giovanni is there, the father of Luigi. I'm sorry, the son of Luigi.
Yeah,
Wow.
but sounds like an interesting place, and what a shame. I lived in Park Slope, do you know, for quite a while.
Right.
When I lived in Brooklyn.
It was all under your nose.
Was
Yeah.
I never knew. No, not the idea.
That's beautiful. But
I may be a
this is one.
snob when it comes to American pizza because I lived in Italy for a while before I came here in the United States, so I know how pizza is supposed to be.
Now that is a whole different channel,
experience.
so to speak.
Yeah.
The pizza channel.
Yeah.
Italian pizza.
Yeah, but so I thought that all the pizza that I tried here was inferior, but I guess there's some great one too.
Oh yeah. It's so many things to taste in life. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. But this wine, wow, very smooth.
I think it's awesome.
Very smooth.
Really. I'm glad you like it too.
Yeah. Once again, I'm just a lay person. If something doesn't make me gag, I'm all for it.
Well, I think Mouli will be our wine du jour.
Yes. Moulin Rouge. Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Well, the Moulin, yeah.
Well, it's a rouge wine.
Is it? Yeah. You're right. Yeah, rouge means red.
Red.
In French, right? Yep. Wow, delicious. Absolutely delicious.
Beautiful.
We just okay. So, what kind of food are we missing here to go with this?
I would say steak will do.
There we go. There we
Steak
go.
will do just
There we
fine
go.
with this one.
There we go. And the average man can grill up a nice steak at home, right?
No,
With the proper equipment.
I consider myself a very average
Oh, but
man.
come on.
And I have very average equipment.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
But you grill one of the
usually
great
it
steaks,
comes
I
out
know.
okay. Kind of okay.
Well, you're being humble. It's beyond okay, folks. This guy's a grill master.
No.
Wow,
You're
fantastic.
putting me to shame.
No.
But
Fantastic.
yeah, steak. It's hard to really if you are not a complete novice. It's really hard to spoil a good steak.
It's hard to spoil a good steak.
Yeah, and steak is just such a forgiving kind of cut of meat. Especially if it's
don't
on the bone.
overcook it, right?
Yeah, just be careful not to overcook.
Right,
That's
right.
all.
Don't go beyond what do you suggest? Medium, right? Don't cook it
I
beyond
usually do medium rare.
medium rare.
My wife and a couple of my friends prefer medium.
Sure,
Even though
sure.
they call it medium rare.
Sure,
In
sure.
reality, it's medium.
Sure.
But yeah, nothing beyond that.
Gotcha. Well, when your palate becomes more developed, then you definitely go for the medium rare, and you'll never go back.
I don't know. I wouldn't criticize it one way or the other.
I
Some
see, I
people
see. Both are
like.
fine.
You know what I'm saying? Don't go beyond. Some people just love well done steak.
Oh, well done. Okay.
Okay. Listen, cowboys in the prairie when they were like watching those herds,
Yes. Yes.
like back in 19th century or
Yes.
20s.
Yeah.
I don't know how about today, but back then, I know, I read about it, they would never eat any steak that was less than well done.
Okay.
And
Okay.
you know why?
Well, they don't want to get
It's too
sick.
damn dangerous.
That's it. That's it. That's it. Yes.
You couldn't
Yes.
afford it. There was no doctor. In the middle
That's
of,
right. That's right.
Nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah. The only doctor is like a
Yeah, somewhere in
couple of
Colorado,
days right
Texas.
away.
Yeah.
By the time you get there, you're dead.
Yeah, that. Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting point. Interesting point. So the people of the old days were a little bit more careful. See, they wouldn't venture into the
Exactly.
into the medium rare zone.
Oysters, like raw oysters,
Sure.
want always.
Oh, the cowboys.
Yeah.
The cowboys would definitely, cook that.
Well, prairie oysters, maybe.
Yeah, burn them to a crisp. Oh my lord! Wow, beautiful wine, folks. I tell you what, you don't know what you're missing out, right? This is not just about military; it's about life, right? You got to
Right.
go have a taste. Okay, that's it. Have a taste. Thank you, Igor.
You bet.
Okay, once again, to all the heroes, to present and past.
Fantastic. Cheers.
God bless.